right, this is part 2. All right, so this means this is the second half of what we learned during this section. If you want to go in order, make sure you watch the other video first. But here we're going to start with main idea 3. So if I were to show that to you all the way back in the beginning, I'm going to start here with main idea 3. France and Spain helped the Patriots fight the British. And go all the way through the winter at Valley Forge, tested the strength of the Patriot troops, and that the war continued at sea and in the West. So, explain is that France and Spain helped the Patriots fight the British. If you remember, the Battle of Saratoga was considered a big turning point in the war. Right? The Patriots won with the help of their general, who was actually used to be part of the British Army. And this kind of shifted the way people looked at the war, and the Patriots are no longer an underdog. Right? Now it's starting to look really well for them. So, because of this, the French and the Spanish decided they wanted to help out, right? France and Spain already lost a lot of land to the British, right? They already kind of had their own problems with Britain, and they really liked the idea of helping somebody else beat Britain. Bonus, they get a new ally if the colonies become their own free and separate states and country, right? So they were happy to see the trouble that the American colonies were causing for Britain. So after this Battle of Saratoga, France, Spain, and Holland, we'll mainly focus on France and Spain, decided to join the fight on the side of the Patriots. This is huge news. It's a big part of why the Battle of Saratoga was a turning point, is because now we have all of this help from our foreign allies. So some people helped were independent soldiers that we'll learn about, right? Marquis de Lafayette supplied money and military skills, so that helped to make our army stronger with more supplies. And Baron Friedrich von Steuben, it's so hard to not say that in that accent, he came from Prussia to help train the Continental Army, right? So he helped train the army to make them a little bit more organized and strong. All right, more vaguely, France. France joined the Patriot forces first, and what they did was they signed a treaty of support. So pretty much they said, we will formally declare that we support you. How they supported them was by increasing the level of supplies and providing soldiers and ships. Spain joined the war a little later, and they had this guy, Bernardo de Galvez, who was the governor of Spanish Louisiana. At the time, Spain owned Louisiana. And what he did to help the Patriots was he stopped the British supplies from getting to the British soldiers, right? They went through Louisiana and he halted that process. So we kind of have new strategies from both sides, where France is increasing our supplies, soldiers, and ships and making the Patriots a stronger army, while Spain is making it so that the British army has less supplies and is weakening the British army. Right? You see how this is going to help us? France is making us stronger, and Spain is making the British weaker. This is very good news if you are a Patriot soldier. All right, main idea 4. So even with all of this help and all of these supplies, there was a really tough winter in Valley Forge that really tested the strength of the Patriot troops. Valley Forge is in Pennsylvania. It's about an hour from where we live. So you may have been around there before. So, but you know the weather in this area, right? It gets cold in the winter. So the Continental Army was really low on supplies, and they decided they had to settle for the whole winter in Valley Forge just to make it out. So even though it was a really brutal winter and they had not enough food, didn't have enough clothes for the weather, they didn't have enough shelter to keep themselves safe from the weather, About 2,000 of them died from diseases or malnutrition because they didn't have the food and supplies that they needed to survive this winter. But even though this tested the strength of the Patriots and there were a lot of losses, the Continental Army wasn't so defeated that they couldn't continue, right? The Continental Army itself was still surviving and going strong. All right, lastly, our last main idea is that the war continued at sea and in the West. The main point here is that the entire war isn't just happening on land in the 13 colonies, right? If you know anything about the setup of the military, you have your army who fights on land, and the navy is the part of the military that fights in the sea. So, and there was fighting at the sea, right? The Continental Navy, we haven't used that phrase yet, but they existed and they helped. But the Continental Navy was aware that they were a really small navy, and that the British had a really big navy, and that they had no shot of fighting those big ships. So, what they did to help instead was that they wanted to seize British supply ships, right? So, what that means is, all right, maybe the Continental Navy couldn't fight off and win against the big British ships, but if they could sink supply ships and make it so that the British soldiers had less supplies getting to them, very, very similar to what Spain was helping us with, right? Now we're trying to make sure that the British have less supplies. That's how they were going to help. Do not worry about John Paul Jones. Okay, I took him out of there because we are not going to focus on him. Okay, and then, so the war is not only on land, it is at sea, and it's also on land but out of the colonies, right? So in the West, where if your face, sometimes I mirror you, so I hope I'm pointing the right way, right? If you go north, east, south, west. So we're on the east coast, going further inland. And they were helping as well. This guy, George Rogers Clark, was managed to capture a British training village, which won the Patriots a big battle. And again, they couldn't trade, they had less supplies. And this was a really, really big factor for us, is that the British always had more soldiers and they were better equipped. But now we have more equipment because of France. France is giving us more equipment and soldiers to level the playing field. And between Spain, our Navy ships, and people helping us in the West, we are doing a really good job at cutting the British off from their supplies, right? So that this way they're weaker with us soldiers while we are gaining strength and supplies from our new allies, France and Spain. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. There is also a quick recap that's only 7 minutes of the entirety of what we learned in this section, if that works a little better for you, but it goes a little bit less in depth.